Something about your love changes everything. Changes everything. Something about your love. Something about your love changes everything. Changes everything. Something about your love. Something about your love changes everything. Changes everything. Something about your love. Something about your love changes everything. Changes everything. Something about your love. Something about your love changes every. You turn my morning into dancing. You turn my morning into dance. You turn my morning into dancing. You turn my morning into dancing. 'Cause your love changes everything. Your love changes everything. You turn my morning into dancing. You turn my morning into dancing. You turn my morning into dancing. 'Cause your love changes everything. Your love changes everything. Oh, there's something about your love. Something about your love changes everything in my body. Oh, something about your love. Something about your love changes everything. It changes everything. Something about your love. Something about your love changes everything. It changes everything. Something about your love. Something about your love changes everything. Changes everything. Something about your love. Something about your love changes everything. Something about your love. Something about your love changes everything. Changes everything. Something about your love. Something about your love changes everything. Changes everything. Something about your love. Something about your love changes everything. You turn my morning into dancing. 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 Something about your love. Something about your love changes everything.
Well, here we are on a Wednesday morning sitting on pins and needles, wondering if we have video and audio, because yesterday we just couldn't get it done. Have no clue. Still, we studied that for hours yesterday and still couldn't tell. But you've got to tell me, do we have sound? Can you hear me? Can you see me? Let me go down to the bottom and see. Chuck B says you're good. Chris Connolly, video and audio good. Steve Drew says we do. All right, well, let's go back up to the top and see who we have. My cousin Dave Donnelly, good morning. Chuck B, shalom, gentlemen. Ken Gooch, good morning, fellow brothers in arms. There's Chris Connolly. I'm out there on X. Bert Reggiani, good morning. What else do we have? Cartier, woo, woo. Yes, yes, yes. Oh, by the way, Cartier, Aaron, when I went live, I didn't pay attention to the drop down because you know you got to go live a second time. But there was something there that was a link to the Flourish intro. And so when I picked my intro, it overrode it. I don't know if it's selecting a default or somehow that became a default intro, but we got to look at that in the next devotion that we do. All right, I got to do the whole chapter of Genesis 17. So hold on, buckle up. We got to get it done. I don't want to change the whole schedule. So Steve and Aaron have me doubling up today. So let's see if we can do it. Let me pull it up. So you got to remember, let me pull myself back in. You got to remember that couple devotions ago, we had Abram and Sarai deciding that they were going to follow some of the kingdom of this world patterns of when a woman is barren and can't have a child, you sleep with your top maidservant because she's like family anyways. And so now you sleep with her and that child becomes your descendant. And well, that didn't go very well, as we know, and Ishmael was born and he was 86 years old. 86 years old. When God told him, it's not going to be Ishmael, but you're going to have a son. So we turn the page, 86. We turned the page. When Abraham was 99, not 86. Listen, not 86. You might have thought that at 86 and God telling him he's going to bear a son, that it would be like the next year, or maybe the year after that, or maybe the year after that. Poor Abram had to wait another 13 years. 13. He's into his 90s. He's 1 year shy of 100 years old. His name is still Abram. The Lord appears to Abram and said to him, I'm God Almighty. Walk before me and be blameless, that I may make my covenant I may make my covenant between me and you, and may multiply you greatly. Then Abram fell on his face, and God said to him, behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be a father of a multitude of nations. No longer shall your name be Abram, but Abraham. Abraham, father of a multitude, father of many. For I have made you the father of a multitude of nations. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make you into nations, and kings shall come from you. That's going to be from Ishmael and Isaac. And I will establish my covenant between me and your offspring after you throughout their generations for an everlasting, notice the word everlasting, covenant. That covenant that God's making when he went through those animal carcasses and burned them up, that now he's not only going to make that covenant with Abraham, but he's going to make it with his entire generation, and it's going to be an everlasting covenant, which means we are part of that covenant, but that's a whole nother sermon. And I will give to you and to your offspring after you the land of that you've been sojourning, the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. And God said to Abraham, as for you, you shall keep my covenant, you and your offspring after you throughout the generations. And this is my covenant which you shall keep between me and you and your offspring after you. Every male among you shall be circumcised. You shall be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskin, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. He who is 8 days old, you shall be circumcised. Every male throughout your generations, whether born in your house or bought with money or from a foreigner who is not of your offspring. And he goes on to say, any circumcised male who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. So you just got to understand, this is where I tie circumcision into baptism in Colossians chapter 2, where he says that you are no longer circumcised by the hands of men, but you're circumcised by the hands of Christ, in that you were circumcised in your baptism. That in your baptism, you were connected to the death and resurrection of Jesus, that your sinful nature is gone. And so hence, baptism replaces circumcision in the eternal covenant. But here we go. Isaac is promised. And God said to Abraham, as for Sarai, your wife, I'm changing her name too. She's now going to be called Sarah, which means princess. Some have translated the mother of many. I will bless her, and moreover, I will give you a son by her. I will bless her, and she shall become nations, kings and people shall come from her. Listen to this, verse 17. Then Abraham fell on his face and laughed. Now, I don't know. You got to have a pretty good relationship with God to think that you can fall on your face and laugh with him. But this is why I love our God. He knows he waited 13 years. He knows that he's been driving Abraham crazy. He knows that he's taken them to the verge of impossibility. Verge of impossibility. It is biologically impossible for Abraham and Sarah to have a child. So out of that impossibility, he laughs and says to God, shall a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? Shall Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child? And Abraham said to God, oh, that Ishmael might live before you. Just I already have Ishmael here. Let's do something easier than all of that. God said, no. But Sarah, your wife, shall bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac, which means what? Laughter. Because you laughed, right? Imagine that for the rest of your life, as you're talking to your child, you're being reminded that God spoke to you a promise. You didn't believe it. You laughed at it. And now every time you say his name, you're remembering how powerful God is. Guys, there are some things we got to learn here. We have felt like Abraham. We have felt like God's not listening. We have felt like he's not opening any doors. We have felt like it's been too long. We have felt, and then we start to take things into our own hands. And no, we got to rely on God's word and God's promises, even if it takes decades, generations. God is not a McDonald's where we drive through and we just say, hey, give me this and that and the other. And 2.5 minutes later, we've got a meal in a bag. God promises will be fulfilled, but his timing and not ours. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his offspring after him. Listen, as for Ishmael, I've heard you. Behold, I have blessed him and will make him fruitful and multiply him greatly, and he shall father 12 princes, and I will make him into a great nation. So all of a sudden, the whole Middle East, that the Arab Middle East is going to be the descendants of Ishmael that also came from Abraham. But I will establish my covenant, highlight, underscore, circle, my covenant. My eternal covenant promise is not going through Ishmael. My eternal covenant promise, Jesus, the Messiah, is going to come through Isaac, whom Sarah shall bear to you this time next year. So when he had finished talking with him, God went up from him. Abraham took Ishmael his son, all those born in his house, bought with money, or every male that was a servant in Abraham's house, and he circumcised the flesh of their foreskin that very day. And God had said to him, as God had said to him, Abraham was 99 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. Ishmael, his son, was 13 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. That very day, Abraham and his son Ishmael were circumcised. All the men of his house, those born in the house and those bought with money that were foreigners, were circumcised with him. I just simply want to end with the idea that God was faithful and Abraham was obedient. He believed in the Lord, and it was reckoned to him as righteousness in Genesis 15. Abraham is beginning to believe God even when it doesn't make sense. He's beginning to I mean, he doesn't understand why this long, why when I'm 100 years old. Now, we can kind of speculate because God wanted to prove to him that he's God. Like, I think ultimately to each and every one of us, he wants us to let go of our God hold, our control. I don't trust you. I've got to be in control of some of these things. And he needs to break that in us. We have, those are some of the roots that have to be broken. We are not in control. We have to let go. And we have to trust that God is in control, that God is faithful. He will fulfill his promises. And so Abraham says, okay. And immediately he goes out and has himself circumcised as well as every male that he has in his clan. He's faithful. 100 years old. Well, none of us is 100 years old, but I think many of us have done exactly what Abraham has done, and we've decided that God's not doing whatever it is we think he should do fast enough, so we've taken things into our own hands. We take matters into our own hands, and we get it done, or we attempt to get it done, and then it becomes a mess. It becomes an absolute mess. God's okay with us being frustrated. God's okay with us doubting. He's okay with us laughing. He's okay with us just going, it doesn't make any sense, God. He's not okay with disobedience. At the moment that we're going to cross a line of disobedience, he's asking us to look back at him and say, even though you don't make sense, I'm going to do what you said. It's called faith. All right, I'll leave it at that. I'm glad we had audio video. I did catch up, did the whole chapter. So now we're caught up to tomorrow. Shane, great to have you on board. Good morning. I think that's it. So blessings on your day. Make it a firmly rooted day, and may someone see Jesus in us today. Peace.